In this video, we're going to walk you through how to triage alerts. This is a high-level video and overview of how the SOC, the Perch SOC, is going to work on your behalf, or if you're a customer and like to triage your own alerts, this is also a very good introduction into how the triage process works. So there's a number of ways you can get to your alerts. I'm logged in here at the dashboard, and one way we can see them is we can just scroll down to all of our recent alerts. And keep in mind, these are all time stacked. So here in my demo network, I've got several alerts here that are all about 3 days old. The other way that you can get to alerts is you can click up here on this little bell icon, and we can bring up all of our alerts. So I'm going to go ahead and use our new beta view. This is a new UI that we've been working on that's just a better way to show alerts in a queue. And so you've probably seen queues like this before. We have an unreviewed queue for any new alerts that have been seen within your networks that have not been looked at by a human, of which I don't have any right now. We also have an investigation queue. So the investigation queue is useful for any time a human is looking at an alert. So oftentimes our SOC, if they're looking into an alert that's going to require some work and research, they're going to click on this and they're going to move it into investigation. We also see customers do this a lot as well. So customers that are very involved in the process, if their IR team or threat research team sees an alert that they want to dive into, they may do the same thing. We have a hold queue. The hold queue is, for most of our customers, they just leave this if they're doing something that's going to take some time. Perhaps they're waiting for a response from a vendor. They're doing some research that's going to require information coming back from other members of their organization. Here in my demo platform, most of my alerts are all here on hold, and there's a reason for that. My SOC knows, hey, this is Wes's demo platform, so leave this open. Let him use that for demos. Anytime you see an alert come in for the Perch security organization, just drop it into the hold queue. And then we have the escalation queue right here. And so this is, if you remember on the very front of the dashboard, we were showing an escalated alert. So this is where escalated alerts actually live. So if you have more than one, they'll all show up here. The advantage of this is being able to quickly and easily and efficiently get to that particular alert. And then we have a closed queue. So a great number of our customer base works for highly regulated environments. We understand the need for that audit trail, so to speak, where you have a history of all of the alerts that have been seen in your network. So you can pull up each of those, and then you can go and dive into the details of those and see all of the information about that alert. It's also searchable. So you'll be able to go through and look for specific search keywords and titles that you may be looking for if you're doing some research within closed alerts. So let's go ahead and dive into a sample alert. Now in this demo, we're not going to get extremely in-depth. I just want to give you a high-level overview so you have an idea of how Perch works and a general idea of how the threat research process would work alongside of that. So let's just work on this very top alert. This is a great place for us to start. So what we see here is a number of different things. We currently know this alert is on hold. We know the last time we saw this was 3 days ago, and we see right here the threat community that produced the intel that generated this alert comes from Emerging Threats. So this is a vendor feed. Many of you might have heard of the Emerging Threats and Emerging Threats Pro feed. It's a very, very solid feed. And we can see, remember, I can manage more than one company. So this is the Perch security company that saw this alert. And so if you are managing multiple alerts, you'll see them all stacked up here, and each company that is related to the alert will show here. So it's very simple to know if you're in management of multiple different companies and doing threat intelligence for all of those, you'll see all of those aggregate here per company. We can see a description of the alert here. So this comes from Emerging Threats, as we mentioned, and we can see that it's saying, hey, we're seeing something suspicious or something out of band. We're seeing a zip file being downloaded, and inside of that zip file is a VBS script. Now that's normally something that we would want to take a look at, right? That's not normal traffic. So we're not saying at this point, hey, this is 100% malicious, we need to go after this. We're not saying that. What we're saying is this is something that is out of band and worth some investigation, because we don't typically see something like this. We can also see the IP flow here. So we see it comes from an IP, this IP right here externally, and it looks like it's coming from somewhere in the US. And it's being delivered down to this endpoint here. We also see this is traveling over port 80, most likely TCP, but we'll be able to dive into that and confirm it in a second. And then over here we have a number of different actions. We're not ready to choose one of these actions yet, like a remediation or a false positive. We would need to look into this first. So let's go ahead and do that. The best way to do that is to click on the details right here for this threat indicator. And so when we click on this, you're going to notice this is where Perch really comes alive for threat analysts. And so a number of things show up over here. On the left are the observables that have been published for this threat indicator. So these are some of the things that we are looking for within the network traffic or something that we're specifically looking for to alert off of. We already know the description. One thing that's interesting here is if you're an ISAC member and there's bulletins that are published alongside your intel, you are going to see in most cases a little read more button right here, and you can actually pull that down and you can see all of the analyst notes around that indicator. So you can see, a member of this ISAC reported this threat. Here was the triage process. Here's what they did. Very, very helpful for you to see information about this intel, why it was published, and give you some guidance in what to look for. Over here on the right, we can actually see the action history within Perch. So we're big believers at Perch that security should no longer be your own, security castle and moat. We should be able to make intelligent decisions based upon and guided by what others have seen as well. I mean, one of the whole reasons we join threat communities is so that we can share intelligence. We can work together. When one of us sees a threat, we can share that with others who may also benefit from that. And so in the spirit of that, inside Perch, every time you see an alert, you actually have the capability of saying, what's been the history of this? What's been the past fidelity of this alert? So in this particular case, this has a 40% true positive rating. So what does this tell us as an analyst? This tells us, hey, this has been seen before, and this has been marked as a true positive before. This is definitely worth a human taking a look at. Down here we have a number of tabs that give us additional information. I'm going to walk through just a couple in this demo, but I won't dive into every single one of them. So one thing that's very interesting and useful is the Suppressions tab right here. I don't have any open suppressions for this, but if this particular alert had ever been seen in my network before, we would have a record of that. We would be able to see the suppression, we'd see the analyst notes, and this is really useful for you to say, oh yes, I remember this, I remember why I saw this, I remember why this is relevant, what happened in the past. That can be an important step in walking through the alert process, is knowing what you've seen in the past. I'm not going to open the sightings in this demo, but sightings, this follows the actual STIX protocol with the STIX sightings capabilities. And so think of, if you never heard of a sighting, think of a sighting as a me too. This is a way of saying, hey, I have also seen this threat. And so where this becomes very beneficial to threat analysts is to say, I'm looking at this particular threat. I want to know who else has seen this. Am I the only person that's seen this? Does this look like it's targeted against me? Is this targeted against maybe only people in my industry? Have only people in financial services or healthcare, for example, seen this particular threat? Or is this commodity malware? Is this something that lots of different organizations have seen? And so within the sightings tab, you're able to see others that have seen the same threat as you. We have a comments tab as well where you can see comments. Sometimes customers and the SOC will leave public comments for anybody can see, and that can be helpful to say, okay, it's good to know what they said about it. But you can also use this for your own private comments here. So you can set as private or personal. Private is anybody within management of your company and Perch is going to be able to see that comment for whoever you leave it for. So for example, Perch Security. We have a reports tab, and I won't spend any time on that for sake of time, but I do want to jump over to the history tab. What's really interesting on the history tab is this kind of tells us the backstory on this intelligence. And so over here we see the very first time this indicator was created. We see the very first time somebody in Perch saw this. And then we see the alert ourselves. And where this gets very helpful is in some cases where you have multiple endpoints that have all seen the same thing, or maybe some kind of propagating malware that's spreading out within the network, you're going to see multiple alerts stack up here. And this is really helpful to say, what's the severity here? Is this thing spreading? Is it contained in one particular network segment? This can be a very useful tool to see, the overall landscape of what's going on. So at this point we know a lot about this alert, but we don't have any idea if this particular instance of this alert is a threat or not. So this is where the analyst platform really comes into view. And so we're going to jump into that in this demo. One of the things I always tell customers is when we jump into this, don't feel like you as a customer have to do this. This is what the Perch SOC is going to be doing on your behalf. But this is also a good look to see what is available for me in the Perch platform, and can clue me into the capabilities that Perch can do. And so let's put on our SOC hats here, and we'll walk through how all of this works. Every single alert has this little Perch icon right here, and we kindly, friendly call this little guy Perchybana. So if you've ever heard of the Kibana platform, we've built the analyst platform outside or off of that. And so what we can do is we can click on this alert, and what it's going to do is it's going to bring up the analyst platform. A couple things will happen right away. The first thing it'll do is it will time lock the events up here from when the time of the alert when it occurred. The other thing that it will do is it will bring up the IP addresses right here. And so the advantage of this is no hunting around, right? It gives you the ability to see right away, very quickly, the information we need at our fingertips to triage this alert. So we can see right here there's a number of pieces of flow traffic, and what flow is, it simply means there's been some communication back and forth between the hosts. So we can pull any of these down if we want to look at these. A lot of this is metadata that kind of surrounds this particular alert. Sometimes this can be very useful to see, especially if we scroll down and we see the states within the TCP state, so we can see, you know, did this thing close out? Was it a proper close down? Did something reset it? Did it just time out, maybe because of a firewall block? Information like that from the flow can be very useful. Here's the actual alert record itself. So we can dive into this alert record and query this and see what we can learn from the alert record, and you'll find it's pretty rich. There's a number of things here that we can look at and use. For example, right here is the actual indicator. So if we wanted to search for this and Google it, it'd be very simple for us to do that. In this case, we see the FQDN, or right now in this case we're not able to resolve the host name, so it just shows it as an IP address, but Perch will resolve host names when that is possible. It can give you some additional information on the internal host or even the external DNS involved. And then here is where what we're really looking for. This is a snippet of the payload. So anytime an alert is generated, Perch will automatically grab a 4K snippet of the payload itself. There's a real important reason that we do that. An analyst needs to see why the alert was generated. This is one of the key initial driving factors to determine, is this alert something that we need to investigate and potentially alert to the customer as an escalation? Or is this something that we can tell from the traffic itself is a false positive, right? So we can walk through this. There's some header information up here that sometimes is very useful. And then down here we can see part of the zip file itself. And this actually is pretty simple to see. There's a couple locations here within the traffic, or within the actual zip file itself, where it's referencing that VBS script. Remember this alert from the beginning of this video. We were seeing some kind of VBS script embedded in a zip file, which is not normal. That's usually something that's very strange. So we can see this referenced a couple of times. So we do know, hey, this does look legitimate. It does look like there's a VBS file script, or a script that's inside of this zip file. So, you know, we might want to take a look at this. So let's back up over here. One of the other things Perch does is we have a file info record as well, where you can pull this down and get some more information about the file. So when that file traversed the network, here's the actual file name, which we already know this. We do grab a hash and display that. There's a number of automation reasons that can be used for this. And in another video at some point, we may explore some of those automation things that you can do, perhaps pushing hashes to endpoints for automatic blocking as an example, right? Another thing we see right here is HTTP status code 200. So we know a 200 status code means OK. So we do know with high confidence this file has been downloaded by this internal endpoint. So this does give us some information to say, whoa, this file did arrive at its destination, probably was not blocked by a firewall through some kind of content filtering, which probably raises our concern. So what would the Perch SOC, or what might a customer do from here? Well, we have enough information at this point to say there's some strangeness going on here. We might want to go and pull down that file. Here's the domain that it pulled it from, and here's the actual zip file itself. We might want to grab that and say, hey, let's pull down that zip file. Let's see what is inside of it. Let's see what that VBS script is doing. We could detonate that in a sandbox and say, you know, what's the sandbox say about this file and what it's doing? Does it belong to or look like it belongs to a particular malware family of some kind? So it's very simple to do that at a high level, and this is just a very simple example, not the world's best, but we could submit this to VirusTotal, and we could say, you know, what do we know about this particular file? So as just an example in this video, we could give this over to VirusTotal and have it take a look, and it'll come back from its results. And it says, yeah, there's definitely enough here to say there's some reputational issues here. So this would warrant, just as an example, the Perch SOC or a customer to say, you know, we're going to dive into this. We're gonna learn more. We're going to, you know, definitely take a look at this and possibly escalate over to the customer. So let's say the SOC has finished their work and they've escalated to the customer. They say, you know, hey, this is a definite true positive on this this file. It looks like it has been downloaded to the host. It may be active. Here's the malware family it belongs to, that sort of thing. The Perch SOC is going to escalate all of that information over to the customer. When the customer remediates and is finished doing the remediation for that particular malware, they can click on this remediation button down here for the alert, or the Perch SOC can do it on the customer's behalf. So we can click on this and it brings up some options. So for example, we could say, well, we've updated our controls, and then I'm just going to write notes right here. However, we could write something like, you know, we've analyzed this alert, the threat, we did find the zip file on the end machine. It was not opened through forensic investigation. However, we have removed the file, or maybe it was opened and we've wiped the machine and we've re-imaged it, something like that, right? We do have the capability of pushing blocks for IPs, DNS domains, things like that to firewalls if they can support dynamic block lists. So if this button right here is checked, it will push a block to a block list that can be then read up by the firewall. I'm going to hit cancel on this so we don't close this out. Let's say the other side of the case was true. Let's say this was a false positive. Let's say this was not a real threat. What the Perch SOC could do on behalf of the customer is they can go right here to false positive, and it's a similar process here. I'm just going to write notes, but it's very simple for us just to say this was a known false positive. We're going to suppress it on the IP address, that 191 address that we saw this from. The reason we're doing that is we're saying this particular IP is safe. Let's say it came from a reputable source, it wasn't malicious, and we may say, you know, we're going to see that happen again from this IP. We want to false positive this. We don't want to see it again from this IP, but we do want to see it from other places if it happens again. If this check mark right here is left checked, you're going to get an email about it. So the customer will see this. They will be aware that this was seen by the SOC, and they can, if they want to get in touch with the SOC, they can just hit reply on that email and very simply get back in touch with the SOC to discuss. So that's a very high-level overview of how the triage process works and how the SOC is acting on behalf of the customer.